guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is an introduction into carb counting, or my personal tips on how to get better at carb counting. So if you're a type 1 diabetic who's maybe newly diagnosed and just wants to learn a few tips and a bit of an introduction into how to start counting your carbohydrates, or equally if you're someone who isn't diabetic and is just starting to track your macros for some fat loss or muscle building goals, then anything I say in this video for counting carbs is equally as applicable for any macros, so protein and fats as well. If you're not sure what I'm going on about when I talk about tracking macros, then have a look at my last video where I explain what macros are and what IIFYM or macro tracking is, and explain the pros and cons of this versus eating intuitively or clean eating. But for now, let's jump into this video, which is all about carb counting or macro tracking. So the first thing I want to say, which is one of the most important things, is to use a scale. People will often do things by eye, especially if you're just starting to track macros, but often this is not very accurate at all, and so I would 100% recommend weighing out your carbohydrates and weighing out your other foods if you are just tracking macros. Personally, when it comes to my diabetes management, I want to make sure that anything that I can control, I have controlled, and that any errors that occur haven't occurred because of something that I've made a mistake doing, which could be easily preventable. So if doing things by eye means that my carb counting is off, that can create a lot of problems after the meal. So I want to know that my carb counting is as accurate as possible. So even though I've been diagnosed now for 15 years, I've been carb counting for way over 10 of them, I still weigh my carbohydrates because it is so important to me that I am being as accurate as possible. A side note of this is to be wary of portion sizes. So a lot of foods now will say what the portion size is, and people will try and do this by eye or think they know what the portion size is, but often we are very, very wrong. Often the portion size is a lot smaller than we think, and we end up eating a lot more of a food or a macronutrient than we think we're eating. And so obviously if you are diabetic and you're eating more carbs than you think, that is never a good thing because you won't have had enough insulin. This is a really big problem with cereal, especially cereal portion sizes according to the box are tiny. They're only like 30 grams, which is pretty much half a bowl, if that. So please don't go off portion sizes. Please weigh things to make sure you're eating what you think you are eating. Alongside this is that you need to learn to read nutrition labels properly. So obviously in different countries there are different rules and regulations around nutrition labels. In England, companies legally don't have to put the nutritional information on a package unless they have made a nutritional claim, for example that something is low fat or low sugar. If they haven't made any of these claims and they're just selling a product, they don't have to put the nutritional information on there, but I would say most companies do now. It has been a long time since I have seen a food that has been packaged that doesn't have the nutritional information on. But you need to learn to read these labels properly. So you'll normally have the nutritional information for all of the nutrients by portion and then by 100 grams. So depending on how much of the food you're eating, you'll use either the per portion or per 100 grams. So for example with rice, if it says information per 100 grams and you are having an 80 gram portion, you will take the amount of carbs in the 100 grams times this by 0.8, and that will tell you how many carbs are in the portion that you are eating. And you can do that for all of the different macronutrients if you are wanting to track your macros. If there is no food label, or for example if you are eating at a friend's house and you don't want to ask them to weigh things, then one thing I would really recommend that I got quite early on into my carb counting kind of journey was Carbs and Cows. This is a book and it is also an app that you can get now. I think it's free, if not it's only a couple of pounds, but it is really, really, really useful. So what you have is a book full of different types of foods. They're all categorized. So you've got, for example, fruits, and then you've got meals, snacks, you've got a bakery section, rice and grains. So you can find the section and then you can find the food really easily. So for example, if I go to the meals section, which I think is probably the most useful one, say you've gone out and you've bought a chicken and bacon pie. So for each food, it has a picture. It then has the carbs, total calories, protein and fat, fibre and saturated fat for this portion. So it gives you a picture and then it tells you the weight of how much is in this picture here. It normally, for each food, gives you 2 different sizes, so you can have a look at this book or on the app. You can see maybe you're having a portion that's between these 2 sizes, and you can see, okay, in this portion there's 55 grams. Okay, I've actually chosen one where it's 2 different things. But okay, let's go to steak pie. This steak pie has 31 grams of carbs, but for this size it has 62. Mine's in the middle, so mine's going to have like 45 grams of carbs. And it's really easy because you can see a visual representation. So for example, if you're at a friend's house and you don't want to get them to weigh out everything, you can have a look at what they served you on your plate, compare it to these pictures, and then you can work out a more accurate estimation of the carbs. Of course, it's not going to be 100% accurate all the time because it depends how they've cooked their food and exactly what ingredients they've put in. But it is a good starting point if you have no idea about what is in front of you and you want to have at least some idea of roughly what carbs are in that meal. This can also be helpful if you are eating out, but I know eating out as a type 1 diabetic can be very difficult, especially at the beginning. So if you are struggling with this and want a few tips, then keep an eye out for my 2 videos time. So this video next week, I'm doing another video in my 5 type 1 diabetes tip series, and in this one I'm going to talk all things eating out and managing your insulin around that. But one thing you can do in terms of carb counting when you eat out is, firstly, I would always look at the restaurant's website, especially if they're a big chain. It is likely that they're going to have nutritional information on their website. So for example, in England, Nando's is really good at this. They have all of their foods and sides and meals and everything like that. You can just click the nutritional information and it tells you everything for that food. So that is a really great source to start with. But if they don't have a website or there's not any nutritional information on the website, which can be the case in kind of smaller restaurants or restaurants that aren't chains, always ask a waiter or waitress, because you never know, they might have nutritional information written down and stored somewhere. And if you just explain that you're diabetic and it would be really helpful for you to see the nutritional information, they'll be more than happy to go and have a look for you. It may be the case that they don't have it, and in which case I would revert back to the Carbs and Cows app or book. But it's always better to ask, because you never know. You don't know if you don't ask. But have a look at the website, if not, ask in person. Another thing that has helped me massively improve my carb counting is using a food tracking app. So if you're tracking macros, it is likely that you're using one of these apps already, but if you're not and you just want to have a bit of help with carb counting for your diabetes, then I would get a food tracking app anyway, because they can be so useful. So personally, I use MyFitnessPal, and it's a free app. And basically you just scan the barcode of your food, and they have a database full of most foods you scan, they will have stored in their database, and for each food it has all of the nutritional information in there, and then it will have it either per 100 grams or per portion, just like on a nutrition label. But instead of you having to do all the maths, you just tell MyFitnessPal the portion that you're having, and then it will do all of the sums for you, and right there and then you will have the carb count for a specific food or meal that you're having. If it's a food that doesn't have a barcode, for example, if it's a fruit, then often there's a search bar as well, and often these kind of things are already logged in there, and you can just select and then again put in your portion. I found this so useful because it saves me having to do any of the maths, and especially if I'm baking. So I really like to bake kind of like healthy sweet treats, because I have a really strong sweet tooth. So I always bake things like homemade protein bars or granola or little brownies. So instead of having to write down all of the ingredients and the portion and the carbs and then do all the maths, you can use MyFitnessPal. They have a recipe area where you can create a recipe. You just scan in all the ingredients, and then at the end you say how many portions that's going to make, and then it calculates all of the nutritional information per portion for you, and it is right there. So I would really recommend getting an app if you are struggling with carb counting or trying to track your macros manually. If you're doing that, then well done, because I would not have ever been able to track my macros if I didn't have this app, but it's definitely makes things a hell of a lot easier. If you don't want to be using an app, then I would definitely recommend making notes of any foods that you eat regularly. For example, if you have the same breakfast every day or you often have a similar lunch, then you can write down the portion size that you're having of any carb containing foods and the carbs in these, and then you have your meal carbs already written down, so each time you go and have that same meal you can have a look at your notes and you know the carbs without having to do any writing down. And if you're just at the beginning of this and you're newly diagnosed, then trust me, it gets so much easier. So I now know roughly whenever I'm having rice or potatoes, I know how much I like to have to fill me up, and so I know how many grams of carbs are going to be in my meal when I have these kind of things. Equally, I often have the same breakfast every day, and I know when I wake up exactly how many carbs I'm going to eat, so I can keep my insulin in my bedroom, do my injection as soon as I wake up, and then by the time I've gone downstairs my pre-bolus has kicked in and I've not had to do any carb counting because it's already in my head. It takes a bit of time, but honestly, once you have the same food a couple of times, it will be in there and all the work is already done for you. One thing that is really key when it comes to carb counting and tracking any macro in general is to weigh your foods dry, not cooked. The weight of foods can really change once they're cooked, and often sometimes on a package, for example like couscous, it will tell you the nutritional information for cooked weight, in which case you can use that, but it's a lot less accurate because, for example, if it's in the oven it might lose a lot of water weight, or if you're boiling potatoes or rice or whatever you're boiling, the food itself can take on a lot of the water weight, and so the weight really changes. And even if they give you the nutritional information per cooked weight, it's not 100% accurate. The weight's not always going to change by exactly how much the package said it will change. If you cook it slightly differently than what the package says, or even if you cook it exactly how the package says, there is a chance that it's not going to be accurate. So I would always recommend weigh everything dry, because then you know there's going to be no discrepancies and it's just the most accurate way to do things. One thing that I did originally find difficult when I would come back from uni for the holidays is someone else preparing my food for me. So my dad often does cook our evening meal as a family, and so he's now kind of got into the swing of counting my carbs for me, and he really understands how important this is for me. So for example, if he's doing a curry and we're having rice, he will just weigh my rice in a separate pan, cook mine in a separate pan, and I've got my carbs. It's really no extra effort, and it saves any guessing if you're trying to split up portions between a family and that kind of thing. If, for example, there's just the two of you and I'm cooking rice for me and James, normally I will just cook it all in the same pan, weigh it before, and then I'll have exactly half, and it's easy to do by eye and easy maths. But any more than that, generally I will just cook my carbohydrates separate to everyone else's, just so then I know the carb count is going to be as accurate as possible, because mine is weighed out and portioned out. It can be difficult, especially if you're living with other people that aren't family that you may be eating with and they may not completely understand, but it's really important for you to explain to them that carb counting is vital as a diabetic and has so many different effects on our health if our blood sugars are not quite where they need to be. So carb counting goes a long way in preventing any of these health issues. So it's really important to just explain to whoever you're eating with or whoever's preparing your food that, you know, it is really important for you to have the carb count, and for them not to be offended. For example, if you want to cook yours separately, it's just part of being a diabetic, and it doesn't create any extra hassle. It's just for people to be aware of that in your household, and it just makes it easier if everyone's on the same page. The last thing I want to say, if you're new to carb counting or new to tracking macros, is please don't be too hard on yourself if you get it wrong. It is difficult and there are things that can go wrong, especially if you're not the one in control of your food, or if the label isn't so helpful, or if you're trying to do things by eye and using the Carbs and Cows book, for example. There are lots of different areas where it can fall slightly and not be as accurate, and you might have a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar, or your macros won't add up right for the day. But just remember, with anything, learning is a process of making mistakes and improving, and the more and more you do it, the better you're going to get. So please don't be too hard on yourself if you get it wrong a few times at the beginning. So with that being said, that is all of my tips on how to start carb counting or how to start tracking your macros. If you want some more daily support and advice around type 1 diabetes or around training and fitness and a healthy lifestyle in general, then make sure to head over to my Instagram at BeckyFitnessT1D, and I upload there daily and upload to my stories loads of different tips, advice, and just also sharing my own diabetes and my own fitness story. I hope this video has been useful for you, and as ever, please leave any video ideas or suggestions in the comments below and I will happily make those for you. I hope you all have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!